Table Talk is not your typical D&D ttrpg podcast. We are not here to run you through our whole campaign.
We're here to talk about everything else in the space of tabletop roleplay.
I'm your host, Alejandra Wilhelm.
And I'm also your host, Mariah Gresham.
And we're your tabletop roleplay girlies. Alrighty, and we are live. Welcome back to another episode of Table Talk. We have a really exciting guest as well this week. We're joined by Natalie New, which I'm so hyped about this because, like, high key, I've been following you for a while on my personal account. So when we connected out like over this, I was like, oh, I'm geeked. Oh my God. Absolutely geeked. But yeah, give us a short little intro about you, where people can find you, and like any cool projects you're involved in, because I know you've done some stuff with Roll D5, which we actually just did an episode with Erica. And I know that y'all are good connections and good friends. So yeah, give us the lowdown about you, Natalie.
Amazing. Thank you. I am Natalie New, also known as New to You on TikTok. Hopefully I'll be broadening my content platforms here soon to be on Twitch and YouTube. That's the goal. But right now you can find me mostly on TikTok. I'm also on Instagram. And honestly, it's just such an honor to be here. Like, I am just so blown away that people even follow me and even want to join in on my journey. So
I feel that we have those moments too where we're like, oh damn, people are, it's wild that people actually
notice us and enjoy our stuff, and connecting with people that we've looked up to in the space, or we consume their content voraciously, and then they're like, oh, we love your stuff, and I'm like, what?
Is this real life? Am I dreaming this? Right. No, I love it. And it's so surprising too, how many people, especially just creators on TikTok who have gotten their start there, are so willing to connect and just be like, absolutely, I absolutely want to be on your podcast, in your game, whatever you're looking towards. So I feel like I kind of talked my way into being here. I was kind of a buy-in. I was like, bring me on your podcast.
Yeah, it was such a hard sell. I know you had to work real hard to convince me.
Yeah, no.
I was just bugging you every day of every week. You're like, shut up.
Yeah. Meanwhile, I'm sending screenshots to Mariah. I'm like, I want to squeeze her in. I know we've already booked 4 people, but
no, we can do it. We'll rally.
Oh, and I just so appreciate you squeezing me in too. I know you guys are booked out. It's hard to keep up with all the guests and recording and editing. So.
Yeah, it's hard because we just record we record once a month for basically the next following month. So we really like to knock it out so we don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
So then there is just a limited amount of spots that we can fill for a single day of the weekend, basically. But yeah, I was as soon as we connected, I was like, I want to squeeze in another one. We're gonna find a way to fit it in.
Yes, we'll squeeze you in. And then also it's the serotonin of just having another week banked.
Oh yeah.
And just have our little hoard of recorded podcasts,
of recorded content that we're I can sit pretty for a month or two.
Because when that starts dwindling down, I start foaming at the mouth a little bit. I'm like, I don't like it.
Oh, that is such a vibe. Yes, I know what you mean. As long as you have it recorded, you're like, all right, I know that I have this locked in. I just need to edit now, and then it can go out.
Yeah, you're on coast mode.
Yeah, I just peruse, and I can pick which one I want to edit, and I'm like, I don't want to have any more.
Yeah.
All I asked her, how many? Do we have some that we've recorded? I'm like, we have no more content.
And I was like, oh, cool.
She's like, great. I'm like, yes. This is why I'm the way that I am. Feed me, mother.
And I was like, sick. I booked this many people.
How many shows or guests did you record today?
Today's 5, including you. You're the 5th.
Oh my god.
Yep. And then we'll do. Ideally,
tomorrow we're planning on recording 2 or 3, maybe 4 if we can squeeze it in.
Yeah, and depending on energy.
Yeah,
dang, and it goes out weekly.
Yeah, goes out weekly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Dope.
Which we could record remotely. We've done it before, but it's also kind of nice to just do it in person. And
I just feel the vibe is better.
Yeah, to Austin. But then after this. Yeah, because like I live in Austin and Ollie lives in
Houston. Yeah.
So
Okay.
yeah, so like we're about 3 hours from each other.
Mhm.
But after this, now we'll have like our big bank, and then ideally in like October, we'll just find a weekend where like I can run another session of like my Vampire the Masquerade campaign, and then like we can record like like maybe like 2 episodes and like bump ourselves out a little bit, but it won't have to be
So crazy.
like a content factory.
Yeah.
Here.
Oh, for sure, for sure. So are you two together right now recording
Yeah.
in the studio?
Yeah,
Mhm.
we're at my apartment.
Oh, wow.
The studio of her
Dang.
The
apartment.
studio,
Yes.
my apartment in the corner that has my
Oh,
desk in
apartment.
it.
Nice. No, I love it.
Yeah, but we just feel like we like the vibe more of when she and I are like in person because it feels more conversational, more easy. We can read each other's like body language a lot better. As
Yeah.
opposed to like remote recordings and stuff. Like we'll do it if we have to, but it just feels more the vibe whenever we're present.
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
But yeah, I know we wanted to cover this week with you though the general and broad topic of just like women in gaming, and I know also like you're definitely a person that's out here both as like an online presence, but also you're working a lot and like doing a lot of streams at the moment, and you're kind of like you mentioned you're trying to branch into your own like YouTube and Twitch content and stuff. So I'd love to hear you like your takes on that and like your experiences and all and just in gaming in general, but also like in the TTRPG space.
Yeah, for sure. I have been very fortunate that a lot of like the majority of my experiences have been really positive and consensual, and I haven't been exposed to I haven't personally been exposed to like a lot of trouble at gaming tables. But I wanted to set up my platform in a way where I could recognize like the struggles of women at tables, you know, whether it was in person or over streams. And so
sure.
wanted to just give a voice to a lot of women, as well as like you know, trans women and non-binary individuals, so that we could kind of like be in this experience together, no matter if it was on Twitch or YouTube or in person. And so I'm stoked to kind of broaden my horizons into more platforms where I can be a little bit more engaged, and kind of get more of the message out to more people, because I think a lot of people feel really locked in and alone in their experiences if they don't have a platform and community like we have been so lucky to have on TikTok, you know, which has been like a huge blessing, if you want to call it that. Yeah, it's just been really fortunate to connect with people. So I just feel lucky that I have that.
Yeah. And like I think those conversations are so incredibly important because like I think oftentimes like in gaming in general, especially like I was always like I started my nerdy venture with like video games, and then you know eventually have now worked my way into this where like this is now my new hyperfixation and I devote like most of my life to it. But you know, it's entering those spaces that were previously like very male dominated before. And obviously like D&D has now become much more open in the sense of like I think the queer community definitely like latched onto it, as well as like it's becoming more common to have women in those spaces. But I do still think there's obviously like the barriers of I feel like what you sometimes experience in like video game environments of like, you know, we tend to have like that issue of learning a new skill in something that is normally like male dominated.
Yes.
And being afraid to fail or like making mistakes.
My thing of like the idea of showing, because like I vocally say like I am not good at video games necessarily. Like I do play them because I enjoy them, but like no one's watching for my fucking skill and finesse in like a FromSoft game. I'm still trying to beat the same goddamn Bloodborne boss that I'm so tired of looking at him. But like it's a thing of like trying to learn something publicly and not be good. And like one, I think it's definitely a me thing. I think it's also a female conditioning thing as well, where it's like that if you're doing something, it has to be perfect. And if it's not perfect, then you should do it in private until it is before you put yourself out there. And at least, yeah, with video games in particular, that's something that, yeah, like a source of anxiety for me. Sometimes even with just like playing games around, like no one that's in my life now, but like the other people in the past who are people are just like weird about
Yeah.
that and like elitist, or like, oh, if you haven't played like every game in a series that has ever fucking existed and like dug up the 6 different consoles that you require to play the one from like ye old 1993.
Yeah. Then you're not
like,
then you're not a real
yeah,
fan.
you're not a real fan and you're not
Yeah.
as valid, and it's like, okay, this is annoying and too much.
Yeah.
For sure. I really like the concept that you mentioned of learning it publicly. You know, like you have an audience, and as I was like listening to what you were saying, it just made me realize how many elements are at play there when you do start streaming. You have like gatekeeping, of course. That's like
Of
the
course.
first one. But you also have expectations where a lot of like the male dominated spaces are for them based around controlling the narrative. And so you feel like a need to fulfill that, to not fail. And so you have a lot of these elements that come into play that cause like so much anxiety. And a lot of times we can't put our finger on it just because there are so many complicated feelings involved. And then you have the outside opinion, you know, whoever is watching or you're playing with, that is looking for you to meet their expectations. And that's just not a fair way to game or enjoy that experience together.
Yeah.
So
and I
it's a
think
lot.
definitely
Yeah.
one, becoming okay with that like concept of you're learning something new. It is okay to not know everything about this thing right out the gate, and like you have grace to make mistakes. And like I know, for example, I've referenced this in a previous episode, but like I had a moment in one of my sessions where I was still relatively pretty new to the game, and I was like still learning about like how to handle combat and action economy and things. And I was playing a new class that I had never played before. And it was also a brand new DM who had never DM'd before. And so like I think we entered our first combat, and I like what I now know, having like played, is like I'm an assassin rogue and I had the first like initiative. So I could have used that to basically like do some hella buku damage, you know? But I did not know that mechanically about my character or anything. And so it was a situation where there were enemies in the cavern, and it was like a very narrow hallway, and we were on the other like side of that. And I was coming at it with the logic of like a video game, and I was like, well, I want to like kite them through this like bottleneck, so we don't have to deal with all those enemies in a broad space. So I like kind of tried to basically hold back and like lure them in, and didn't really like, I knew with my movement I wasn't good, I was only going to be able to reach one of them and then put myself in a room full of enemies.
Yeah, you're in the middle of like a fatal funnel situation.
Yeah, and
like that's not great.
And then so I was trying to basically like kite them through, but like what I now know mechanically is like I should have gone in that room and just done hella damage, because like my teammates would have come after me. But I went at it from a different angle, and like I think the DM made a comment that like kind of felt very like me wasting my turn. And he's like, okay, cool. So Allie's gonna do nothing. And I got like snipped, like I felt some kind of way about it, and I checked in with other people, and I was like, am I overreacting? And then like what I now feel like it came from is that element of like, you know, what back when I used to play video games, and how I hated playing games with like online lobbies, because I wasn't allowed to like make mistakes without feeling inadequate. And stuff like that. And so I eventually talked to that GM and like was like, hey, like you made this comment, made me feel like this, da, da, da. And he fully apologized and was like, I didn't even realize like I said it that way, and I'm so sorry. And like he's been perfect ever since. Like he was very good and receptive and adapted and stuff, and like didn't see it from my perspective at first, and I was like, I totally see why that was like uncalled for and why it would make you feel like that. But it's that experience like as a woman in those spaces, and then being like, ooh, like yeah, I'm not as fond of criticism in that space, because of the fact of like it's a little triggering to like the toxicity within gaming, especially of like men in those spaces against women trying to enter that space.
Well, and it's criticism that feels belittling.
Right? Yeah.
It's like, if it's advice or if it's like pointing something out or whatever, that can be okay. But when it feels like I'm nitpicking or I'm harping or I'm not letting you forget that you made a mistake, and like that wasn't necessarily that conversation.
No, yeah.
Like that situation, it was just like a dumb comment that was made because y'all didn't know each other, and you turned out and he's like, "Oh fuck, no, that was I see why that would hurt your feelings."
Yeah.
And didn't do it again, which is all you can hope for. But in general, it's not a like, oh, you aren't willing to take advice, because you are, but it's when you feel like you now have to perform at a certain level to not be called out. That's annoying.
Yeah.
And I think it's important too, like that you were able to take that time and give yourself that grace to take time to kind of analyze what you were feeling there. Lately, I've been trying to understand too, like when I just call it like uncomfy. When I feel uncomfy, I'm like, okay, why am I so uncomfortable about this? And it sometimes can take a day or two to really like put my finger on exactly what I'm feeling and create like an argument that I feel comfortable with, like coming to communicate. And so I think it's awesome that you were able to take that time and you were able to communicate that to your GM, and that he was also willing to meet you in the middle there and, take ownership of his mistake. And it's so funny too, like, because there are so many complex feelings there, and you were also trying to deal with the mechanics publicly, whether that was in front of your group or a wider audience, that you were trying to break down a lot of complex actions all at once that you didn't have experience with. And so that can be really difficult, but I'm seeing now that like, it's just common sense where you have all of these complex emotions. It really just comes down to like 3 things. And that's just like communication and seeing if they're going to meet you in the middle and recognizing that you're uncomfortable, like at the very first step. So like uncomfortable communication, and then just drawing those boundaries for yourself. Like it's funny that it comes together in such an easy way when you have so much going on to deal with.
Oh, yeah.
I think that brings a lot of like relief to people too, where they're like, I don't know how to handle this. It's like, it's actually really simple. We can break it down,
Yeah.
So that's awesome.
Like I had a similar situation kind of in our like kind of Elder Tour Western campaign with our DM for that, Teddy. He's awesome. But like, and at this point now, like we're all much more comfortable with each other. But like I had never, like we met him at session 0. Like you guys met on like Hinge or something. You hadn't met in person. And like I started with one character, and the backstory she had put her in a position where like she had really only combative interactions with NPCs. And like usually for me, that's okay. But I think it was a weird mix of like I had some personal life stuff going on, and I was dealing with unpacking some things from some past situations, and like it was me not holding boundaries quite well and like letting things bleed through. And like when Teddy and I were role playing a scene that was combative, it felt like Teddy was being combative and me, the person, even though that was not what was happening. And that took me a minute to understand, like, because I was just shutting down.
Yeah.
Anytime that it was like, because I love role play, and I was like, please do not make me role play. Like it was a gunslinger. I'm like, I'll shoot something real good for you. Just please don't make me role play.
Just shift the camera away from
me.
Which
is insane, like very unusual for me. And like we play that game once a month as well. So it was like the first session, I'm like, okay, the first session is always kind of a wash, right? Because you're settling in. And then the second session, I still felt the same way. And I was like, well, fuck, this is a problem. And like, I kind of like had a whole breakdown over it. Because I was like, I feel like everyone's having fun and I'm the only one that's not. And I feel like if I say something, it's going to fuck up the whole situation. And also like in retrospect, the last male DM I had, at him he and I as a person, like we had a very unhealthy relationship. And I could not make a mistake around him or I would pay
without
for
him holding it over.
In and out of the table. And so that was definitely a situation where I was carrying some of that baggage and like projecting it onto Teddy when he was not like he was not doing that, and he was not, but I had that fear that it was going there. And then when I step back, I'm like, okay, what can we actually do to address this? And then I'm like, what if I just play a new character? What if we just roll a new fucking crazy ass goblin-y, like creepy monk who collects bones and just punches stuff, and we start over. And like I communicated that to Teddy and kind of like where I was at and all that. And he was again very understanding of it, and he's like, I want to check in and make sure if there's anything I can do to like
make you feel more comfy,
make you feel more comfortable, or like any of that, like please communicate that to me either now or going forward. And honestly, after I had taken time to think about it, I'm like, I think I just had a lot of shit wrapped up in that's mine that I was not addressing, and that's not on him, but it's creating a situation where it's hitting some nerves that are a little too raw. And I would like to just have less emotional baggage in this game.
Yeah.
Like, I was also playing my Strixhaven character, and Ollie's game has a lot of emotional baggage, and I live for that shit. So I was like, maybe I just need a lighter
break.
A lighter time.
Maybe I can't have 2 sessions back to back that are just emotional trauma.
Serious. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Valid.
So as soon as I changed like characters and like we worked out a little bit of like a backstory for her and everything, and like kept it pretty light and fun the first time I played my monk, I was like, great. We're rocking and
off to the races.
And since then I've been perfectly fine. But like that was, and like we touched on this before, of like we each have had those situations where like, yeah, when we're telling the other person, we're like, oh yeah, no, of course this is valid. But when it's you and you're like, no, I'm gonna fuck up everything.
You're like, what if I just harbor this inside me and let it fester?
That seems like a wise decision. Yeah, let it fester.
Yeah. Nothing will go wrong.
My therapist will
totally.
That's fine.
Break it down another time. Totally. Was that for like a personal game or like a game that you streamed?
It was an in-person game. At the moment, we don't stream any of our games. We had tried to like think about it early in the Strixhaven one that I'm running, but we all kind of agreed that like, especially because we came off of a really toxic table dynamic, and like all of us chose to leave that like previous DM that Mariah was like talking about. We kind of left that, and that's what like basically started me DMing, was just we didn't have someone to run the game, and I had a bunch of the books, and so I was like, you know what, I'll do it for the girls and the gays, and that's it. And started that, and I've like fallen in love with it now. But it was definitely a matter of like, I don't know, we just kind of really like the vibes of our table when it's like just us, and it kind of changes things whenever you start doing it for a mass or like an audience, and knowing that's going to be put out into the internet kind of thing. So we were like, let's keep this personal here on this game. But then we've toyed with the idea of like, we'd be comfortable streaming a game potentially in the future, if we started out as like something we know we're going to stream,
Yep. And I think, coming out of that Ravenloft game, like we needed something
that was just us.
That was just us. That was safe. That was comfortable. Because even like making my character for Strixhaven, I mean, she's one of my favorite characters I've ever played now. But there was months where I was like, I don't know what I want to play, because I don't really want to play anything.
Yeah.
Because it had gotten so bad with the last one that I just was so disenchanted with the whole thing. And even though I knew it would be radically different, right, with like the whole different situation, it was like we just needed something to come back and like find that joy,
find our love for
again.
tabletop again.
Yeah, and like now looking like that, we're kind of an arc. Like my character just finished her arc, and we're going on to like our friend Bex's character. Like I would love to at some point like write out, take our work, because we've recorded the sessions for ourselves. And like take those and write them into a script and make them into an animated series or something like that. That's I think a goal that like
we both have,
we both have,
because it is a really good story, and like we are nothing if not. So my table's all women, which is lovely. It's a lovely time.
How refreshing.
And it's the 4 of us, and we're all each other. We're all best friends.
We're all best friends, and we work in lockstep with each other, and we can hop into other people's games, and it like we have really good chemistry as players, as friends, and it's very much like we can play any subset of characters and we will have such good like RP just right out the gate. So I'm like, I cherish our games a lot. We have a really privileged position of like playing in a game with that kind of chemistry, as well as like my players make the time. Like we don't have scheduling issues, which is really rare in the D&D ttrpg community. We play once a month. We dedicate a whole weekend to it. We play like between 10 to 18 hours just for my session.
Yeah. Bex and I drive down from Austin to Houston.
Yeah.
It's the same with like they like Ollie and Alyssa or their friend will drive up like when I'm running something. But yeah, like in Teddy's like sort of Elder Tour campaign, it's the 4 of us. And then Chrissy, shout out Chrissy, who's awesome. And then Teddy is the DM.
So it's an all-female cast still with like a male DM.
Which we sometimes play. Sometimes it feels like that's a stream a little bit when we play at like the gaming store because we're in like a private room, but
it's all glass.
But it's all glass, so it does feel like we're in an aquarium exhibit sometimes. And then last time we were doing a thing where we were like unironically barking because someone saw a meme on TikTok and showed it to me. It's like it's a girl being like, "Where my dog's at?" And they just like
start barking in a line outside of like a club.
Like locker room ass barking. And so we started doing that and we just did it in the middle of the thing. And Teddy was like, "What the fuck is happening?" I was like, "Never do that to me again." And I sit with my back to the room, so I don't perceive who is or isn't.
Oh, I have a full view of all these men sitting here playing Magic the Gathering, watching this glass room full of women barking.
Yeah, and like it's a glass room full of women barking, and like this Viking-looking dude
with his head in his hands,
on the DM screen, like praying to something.
It's a time.
Wow. That's so fun. I wanted to backtrack a little bit.
Oh yeah, go
like
for it.
Shed some light on what you said. I think it's great advice too because the way you brought it up. I think a lot of people, number one, like I think a lot of people feel the pressure to continue to stream, and it's so valid to play in person. Not everything needs to be streamed for the public eye, and I don't say that in a way that I'm shaming public content, but more of like, give yourself a mental break. Like you don't have to be on screen all the time, it's kind of refreshing to break it up for like in-person games. And then the second part of that too, I wanted to mention something that you had brought up, and that was like taking a break from serious campaigns where you don't have to quit altogether. And that was a mindset that I was caught in for so long, where I was like, I'm emotionally blocked off. I can't play any other games. Some of it too was like scheduling conflicts where I was like, I just don't have the time to dedicate like this emotional space every week. And so like I feel valid taking that time, and that's not something to be ashamed of if you have to.
Yeah.
But also like playing a lighter character is a huge break too, and I think a lot of people don't think about it like that. They feel like it's like an all or nothing mentality when it comes to D&D, but there are so many angles you can play where you don't have to be the serious edgelord all the time,
Yeah, or like be doing a ton of emotional labor every second you're playing your character. Like I love doing that sometimes, but yeah, it's also fun to like I play a rogue in a different campaign and I just throw knives at people and kill them instantly. And like my mom does stupid. She's a touch of the long death monk, so she's decently beefy, which you fucking need in Teddy's campaign because he does set out for murder.
Yeah, he's like I'm gunning for the cleric, which is me.
Yeah, he gives us tools to help us, and he has like a DMPC that fights with us, and it's probably the only reason we're still alive.
Yeah,
pour one out for Warwick, the like level 10 battle master
who's just beep popping with these level 3 or 4 characters.
Yeah, because we're like
that is so fun.
I think, and
he's the reason we bark.
He's like, no, if you die, you die. Oh. And I like help him. I'm like, if you kill my new character.
On the first run, no.
I will kill you. Yeah. No, that's intense. But like, are we allowed to name drop on here at all?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like brand wise. Okay, so like I think so many people approach D&D like everything has to be Game of Thrones serious, you know? And so like when you're approaching it and you do have a DM like that where you're like they're like I'm kind of set out to kill a party, you know? Like you said, he gives you tools. I'm sure you guys have like all kinds of magical items and little ways out of things and things like that, but that totally changes the game when the DM is like I mean business.
Yeah.
You know?
And you're like,
we're not
cool,
gonna
we
go
also
soft.
mean business. We showed up to that first
Right.
session and we rocked his shit.
He underestimated us for the first session. He's like, all right, bet I will.
But to
I
be,
will
it
go back
was
to the drawing board."
challenging.
It wasn't great. I was like, this is a lot of motherfuckers and not many of us. And your character just had to leave because she was like, had her little cleric heroine and was fighting shit on her own. And then it was like, oh, cool. Now everyone's lighting people in the arena.
And I have 9 health and a single spell slot left. I'm like, I'm dipping.
And there's 2 basilisks for some reason. And thank God I still played my
What
other
level?
character.
We were level 1.
1.
No.
Yeah.
Warwick was level 10.
And he
Great-
threw a
great for
basilisk
him.
at you guys?
Yeah. To
Warwick
paint you the
1v1
picture.
the
Yeah. It
basilisk.
was like the whole
Oh my god.
event of us meeting was like I'm a cleric going through like my cleric test and it's like an arena style thing, right? And so there's like 3 enemies that like rounds of enemies that I have to face. I was like trying to, you know, action economy. I'm like I have very limited amount of
stuff.
spells and things I
Yeah,
can
you
do.
have, like, 2
Yeah, I
spell
think you
slots
start
in
out with like
dream.
3.
Like,
at
Yeah, I
level
had
1.
3. Yeah. So I was like I got 3 rounds to get through and I've got 3 spell slots. So I'm going to try to limit my spells to like 1 per round depending on
Basically a
what I'm
warlock.
facing.
to be able to heal.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you try to rely on my cantrips as much as possible. And I was doing really good
You were doing
with what he was throwing at me. And then we get to the 3rd one and it gets like interrupted. And then it's like basically like domestic terrorists like kind of come in. And then they release like these 2 or 3 basilisks into the
2.
arena.
Oh my gosh.
And then I'm like there. And meanwhile, everybody else is like scattered in the like arena crowd with not a whole lot of ways to get to me. And also, most of us haven't even formally met yet. So how the fuck am I supposed to know to be like, hey, random person in the audience, help me.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, our characters had met, and like I played as she was like a Shatterkai gunslinger, so I had the teleport ability.
Dope.
And so,
nice.
which thank God I had that for that fight, because that bitch would have died. If, like, I don't know if, like, my character Maeve now, she's like half ASMR.
Yeah.
Half like Scourge ASMR. Long Death
nice.
Monk.
Half.
Teddy does the
Half?
character stuff really interesting where we don't take ability score improvements.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
like you can take them at like when you get to ASI levels, but we don't get any like racial bonuses or stuff. So if you want to like combine 2 races that wouldn't normally be combined, then you can pick like 3 abilities or
out of the
proficiencies or
total
whatever from the total
racial
one,
things,
which is really fucking cool. And I've never
wild.
done that before.
Yeah. And I think also because like we're all half whatever and then half air quotes human, we take that fee at first level, which is how he like
we get like a free fee at first level.
He basically helped us out in that because we knew it was going to be a meat grinder. He's like, you get this feat because you're going to need it. You get max health because you're going to need it. You're going to get to pick whatever racial bonuses you want because you're going to need it.
Yeah, so you just pick like 3. So
Wow.
I did have sharpshooter at level 1. And so like my character just pointed at Ollie's. I'm like, get the fuck out.
And I was like,
and
sick.
I teleported down and I was like, I stay blasting. And I just started shooting fucking cultists. And yeah, the DMPC Warwick was just like, the basilisks are for me and me alone. I'm like, great for you.
We're like, you do that.
So he did that.
Oh my god.
The Forbidden Noodle Boys were him. And then everyone else, we had to fight our way out. And then even after we were fighting our way out, he was like, no, you have to get out of the arena. Like, because I thought, we just leave and then we can go, right? We're in like,
no, you got to work your way
God's green
around through the
pasture.
arena to get to the main exit.
No. Yeah, the arena's on fire and filling with smoke, and there's a basilisk in the doorway. And we have to figure that the fuck out and getting around. And good luck getting past the big ass basilisk. So like I'd use 1 teleport to get down from the stands to the arena, and then my other one, which like fucking irked Teddy, but he was proud of me, it's still one of my better combat moments, was like I was standing at the door and he was like, "There's a bat. You gonna get in range of the basilisk?" And I'm like, "Can I see God's light behind the basilisk?" He's like, "Yes." I'm like, "Then I teleport out."
Then I get the fuck out of
like,
here.
motherfucker. Like, yes, thank
Major
you.
shout out to any kind of teleport, shadow walk, gaseous form. You know,
yeah.
like
Yeah.
If you
that
can take
saves your
it,
ass every
take it.
time.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah,
God,
right.
It's
right.
hot and
Use what you
sexy.
got.
I've been playing a lot of
Yeah.
Baldur's Gate, and
Same.
literally any item that gives me like Misty Step or teleport
Bro,
or
oh,
whatever,
Sure.
My
I'm like,
will,
I
just
keep
get
that thing on
will,
me.
Dimension Door, Misty Step, or whatever it is, and I'm like, it's Misty Step. It's not
I feel
Dimension
like that's
Door.
almost as essential as like a bag of holding. You
Yes,
know,
I
like
love it.
I always
Somebody
look for
got to be
that
able
when
to
I'm
get the
doing
fuck out of
character
there
creation.
on a whim.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. At least one of you has to be able to.
Somebody needs
'cause
to
then they
have
might
some
be
kind
able
of
to-
telepathic capabilities or like message spells or whatever, and then
Mhm.
somebody got to be able to cast some kind of teleportation spell.
Or yeah.
Yeah, like
Yep.
I'm
Yep,
trying to unfuck the
100%.
goblin. I've been save scumming my way through the goblin camp and Baldur's Gate. And it's like, yeah, no, you gotta be able to go get that gobby before he starts banging on the drum and like summoning the whole fucking camp.
Mm.
That happened to me
It's a
one
race
time, and
against
I'm
time
like, no, we're not doing that. So I was like trying to kill the goblin priestess, and then like the kind of like merchants stuff, they came in, and then yeah, another goblin went and like beat that drum because I thought you couldn't really destroy the drums because they would be like angry, which I don't know, you just have to do it sneakily. But yeah, I'm like other people started pouring in, and like as that line of like combatants grew, I just went to locate. I relocated.
You're like, I'm not facing
like,
off
fuck
the entire
this in
club.
particular. I'm not even gonna try to do this one. This is too much.
Forget this side quest.
No.
Like I've
That's
used
awesome.
all my spells already, and like all of Karlach's rages, and like we're done here. No, we're starting over.
Amazing. Baldur's Gate is everywhere right now.
It's
Not
so
to like
good. Oh, yeah.
time stamp us, you know, like whenever people listen to this in the future, but like it's everywhere. I don't have a good enough computer to play it, but like everywhere I turn, all of my mutuals, everyone, they're like, Baldur's Gate. And I'm like, I can't relate, but I'm happy for you.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
No, listen, I timed it just perfectly because like my old computer I've had since I was like 16. So that thing's been
How old are
going.
you now?
I'm 27, so like 10 years.
Oh my god.
So
9 years. So she's been chugging. But yeah, she stopped being able to run games a long time ago, and it just can't keep up. And then for like my recent birthday, I was like, by God, I will have a good like gaming computer. And so like my family helped me out, and I bought a few parts and I built it myself.
Wow.
And I
Nice.
didn't even know that Baldur's Gate was like a thing that was being released, and I literally had that thing built when Baldur's Gate dropped, and I was like,
You're
fuck
kidding.
yeah. Like this is exactly where I'm
How
starting.
serendipitous.
I know.
Oh, that's wonderful. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that's my goal too, is to build my own computer. I'm in the middle of buying the parts right now. Like I'm on Coursera and I'm like, okay, $700 and I'm halfway there, you know.
Nice.
If you need help at all, I did so much fucking research. I know so many things about computers that I didn't know before.
Same.
There you
Like,
go.
Yeah, I had an old MacBook that just like it was getting too hot editing a podcast in like Audacity. It was like I would edit.
I mean,
like
podcasting,
you could
but like
cook an
you
egg on that
cannot game
bitch.
on a Mac, like so.
No.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, well, this is not gonna be sustainable, and I don't want to just. There's nothing wrong with the laptop, like for browsing your normal laptop purposes. It was not made for this shit. It barely has a fan.
Yeah.
It just has those little sad vent holes, and I'm like, that's not enough for you, friend.
Oh,
No.
You're just gonna melt eventually.
No.
So I like my
Or
birthday
take off. They just fly away.
Yeah.
something, throw itself off my balcony, like something. But like my birthday's in October, and so my parents like
Happy
helped
early
me pick.
birthday.
Thanks. My parents helped me get like a gaming laptop, which I'm obsessed with.
Oh, dope.
And yeah, we're like running it on, which we've been able to record all day on it, and it's been good, and it's been able to run Baldur's Gate, and I like it a lot. And I now have a laptop with ports on it, which I'm just love that.
So happy that you have USB ports again.
Love the sweet HDMI port. Just stroke it gently.
Amazing. I think my biggest fear is like compatibility. Like I'm like going about like buying these parts, and I've like double checked, triple checked. I've like asked some of my friends, I'm like, okay, does everything look good? They're like, yeah. that looks good.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay,
Yeah.
because I like did a virtual builder too. And they said it was okay. My biggest fear is just like committing and buying the parts.
Yeah, especially because some of the big ones are so expensive. And you're like, bro, if I drop $800 on this goddamn graphics card and it does not,
It's like
Right.
it's too chonky.
Yes.
Like doesn't fit in its spot. And I'm like, yeah, I debated also like building a PC, and I will like some years down the line, but like a laptop made
Sure.
more sense for me and my workflow right now. And also
That's valid.
I would need to get like a bigger desk to have a PC, and I don't have room for that. And I'm like, this is pushing it out too far and stressing me out.
So you both are in multiple campaigns right now.
yeah. So
Mhm.
I play every Monday in A While Beyond the Witchlight campaign online.
Oh,
I play every other Wednesday with my partner as the DM. And that one is like an Eberron campaign, but we're like in this area called Kabara, and we've started a mining town. That's my rogue. She's a bad bitch. She owns a brothel and is a
Very
tavern
cool.
owner, and she will cut a bitch for her workers, and she does have fair working environments for them. And then
oh my gosh, I love that.
every month we play Strixhaven.
Mhm.
Which is about what I had like to kind of go back to the whole conversation around like the kind of bandwidth you have for things, and it's totally okay to like, you know, veer back to a casual character if you need to. I'm like, for me in my life and everything else that's going on with it, I'm like a once a month game to DM is about what I have a bandwidth for.
Yeah.
It's also unrealistic
Yes.
to expect us
Valid.
living that far away to like travel more than once a month. So I'm like, yeah, we play once a month, but we also play for about the amount of hours that people would play in a month in a single session.
That's true.
We play at least 6 or 8 hours.
Yeah. Like
That's
on a minimum.
insane.
And then most of the time we end up veering more towards like, for really intense RP sessions, we'll do like 10 to 12. And then that arc finale was an
Last
18
session
hour.
was 18.
Yeah.
Because we just had a lot to get
That's
through.
Crazy.
Yeah, I play obviously in Strixhaven, and then in Teddy's like Alderaan, Old West horror campaign. And then I have another campaign that another friend of mine runs where it's like a Waterdeep
Yeah.
campaign. He uses like
sure.
he kind of uses the module, but he's changed some stuff too. And I play a rogue there, like a swashbuckler rogue, and she's fun because it's a very kind of like casual, relaxed, like I come in and stay stabbing kind of thing.
My Monday campaign is very much casual chaos. Like I think I went in there with that group because I had never like really played with that group before, but I knew the DM from the Wednesday campaign we played together, and he was like, yeah, I DM. I was like, I didn't know you DM'd. He's like, it's in the Feywilds. I'm like, I love Feywild bullshit. Put me in there, coach. And
Hell yeah.
I definitely initially started with like, I came in with one of like my RP heavy babies. And then once I checked the vibe, I was like, oh no, these are all just a bunch of chaos goblins, and like they love to do things for the haha. And so I'm like, I'm gonna peel back on the seriousness of this character and just vibe with the silliness of those. And it's been really nice to like have a campaign that I'm like, I know that going in there I don't have to do a lot of like emotional labor into whatever RP intenseness and stuff. I'm just like, I'm just gonna sit here and vibe and let my chaos babies do their thing, and I'm just like the big buff muscle mommy.
Yeah, just roll a fuck ton of damage and live your life.
Yeah.
Yeah, like all this campaign I play a reborn paladin, and then I run we kind of missed a month because life got crazy, but I run Vampire the Masquerade, like a modified. It was supposed to be Fall of London, but I fucked up and everyone made interesting backstories that don't fit into the book. And I'm also like emotionally attached to some of the like vampire NPCs. And I want gay husband shenanigans and just like dating sim fun things. And so we can't run Fall of London because I don't want the humans to kill all vampires and like fuck up London just yet. So I don't know where that's going exactly. I gotta figure it out.
Live your dream.
But it's very like court politics, and it's a Camarilla campaign, so it's very like intrigue, and so it's very like that Dragon Age quest where you go and like infiltrate the court and all the like that's the vibe. that I go for, like the different warring factions and who's siding with who and
all that good stuff.
everyone's line. And
what about you? What are your games that you're involved in?
Yeah, so I am playing. Thank you for asking.
Absolutely.
I am playing in a super cozy, really refreshing Eberron campaign, which I have never done before. It's wonderful. Like, we just eat ice cream and drink coffee and make charcuterie boards, and
I love that.
Make friends with people. Like, it's been mind-blowing and really refreshing. Like, sometimes there's that stress of being like, okay, like you both had mentioned, like, I have to put on my serious face and there's going to be a lot of combat. And I don't know, personally for me, like, I feel like combat is just so painful. Like, the way it's mostly run, just because a lot of times you're just sitting there waiting for your turn and it can go on for hours.
I know.
And that's not fun for me. And I'm not saying like to avoid combat completely. I just would love to explore and broaden my horizons when it comes to combat. And one of the ways I've been thinking about it is like throwing in random encounters instead of just like, okay, this hits, next person. Like, so I don't know. That's a side tangent, but I would love to explore like more random encounters and then not sticking to like your monster's hit points, like from the perspective of a DM. And like, what's the vibe with the party? If people are starting to fade out, just kill off the monster. Think about next steps, you know, what they're going to do after that. So I don't know. I've just been thinking of alternative ways to like approach it.
Yeah. So we actually just, we recorded right before you a combat like topic episode with this guy, Dungeon Master Tom, and he connected with us, and like there's so much good stuff in there for like, because me specifically as a DM, like one, again, as a player, I was always like, combat is not my strong suit. And it was a big learning curve for me. And then even more so as a DM, having to create encounters that feel challenging and engaging and balanced was something I was struggling with.
Engaging and balanced.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so I was like,
huge.
Because I'm also that same way of like, sometimes combat gets boring for me and like I'll check out and stuff. And I know Mariah feels the same. And we've been really fortunate that in that Sunday campaign, Teddy is so good at his combat.
Teddy will keep a chokehold on you for like several
and you're like
hours
so tense the whole time because you're like, I feel the stakes and I need to like, you're like processing, and like I love it because I've never been that into combat until I was in his sessions.
No.
And so I'm like, I love that, and I want to replicate that at my table. Not that my game is very RP heavy. Like, listen, this is a girly pop dating sim, and they're in school.
It's fantasy college.
And like half of them have love triangles going, and you know I'm feeding them that good food. But eventually, you know, sometimes you still want to make sure that there are stakes and that feels tense and that feels, you know, like it's got weight behind it.
Yeah.
And so I was struggling with a lot of like the early combats just not feeling like they were challenging, and it was very boring, and like they went in, they killed the thing, and like that was it. And I was like, that didn't hit the way I wanted it to. And so we did a whole episode with him where he gave us so many cool ideas about how to make that combat more engaging and like not keep it separate from RP. Like it doesn't have to be its own like pillar. It can be more engaging and more driven. So like that, I highly recommend listening to that one because he gave me so many cool ideas.
Yes, that's very cool.
Would you mind exploring those ideas? Like, I'm interested now.
Yeah. So he to talk about a few of them was like he mentioned one, like making sure that combat is not separate from RP, like as a DM, making sure that like you're being descriptive. You're kind of like how Brennan Lee Mulligan does, like he really acts out like how that is and interacts with the players as the NPCs as the combat is going. Another thing that we talked about that I thought was so cool, he makes a lot of like stuff that is like he makes boss encounters and magic like items and stat blocks and all these things. And so something he kind of does in his games that he mentioned that I'm like, I love this and I'm going to start implementing this, is with certain monster encounters, there's like achievements. So something kind of like video games. So it's like, it's something that like you go a little bit out of your way to do. It might be kind of difficult to achieve, but if you do, you're going to get either more loot out of it, or the way that I interpreted was like, for example, he made the example of like an encounter with some kind of like owl bear like monster that they were going to have to fight. And he announces the achievement at the start of combat of like, you know, if you manage to ride the back of the monster for 3 rounds, like you'll get something out of that. And then it turned into like 2 of his players getting on there and like holding hands to keep each other on the monster for 3 rounds. And like apparently all the players were so invested in making sure they like actually achieved it for those 3 rounds. So I'm like, that's such a cool way to shift that focus of combat. And the way I thought of it, I was like, yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to mean like they get more loot. It could be something as like simple as like, if there are witnesses to this happening, maybe in the nearby town, then when they go back into town, they get buffs to their charisma and they're known at like, they now have a tag on them of like, oh, you're the owl rider or whatever.
Or like if you prioritize like evacuating civilians or like protecting non-combatants, whatever, then like
give them like little motives.
Versus if you go full murder hobo and like let the daycare burn down, then like if you come back through, people are not gonna be super receptive to you. And like there being actual, especially because like you'll get into like fights in the middle of these like towns and like cities and stuff. So it's like the people that witness that that's gonna have an effect on how they view you, how they view adventurers, all that. So like letting there be social stakes in game. For like after those fights.
Down with murder hobos. I'm personally am so tired of murder hobos because people don't realize too, like when you're playing the game, like you mentioned, like there are social consequences. Like it's almost like a situation of like how superheroes defeat villains. They end up blowing up a whole city, you know, like how many people are killed in that? How much damage? How much is that going to cost, you know, to like rebuild? And so like whether it's physical circumstances like that or like social consequences, like I feel like that is so important. And so many people are like, I'm going to fulfill this weird need of mine in roleplay to just kill everyone and cause mayhem. And it's like, no, don't love that, you know, like it's not, if that's your way of escapism, like maybe you should consider some therapy, like figure out why you need that. Like
I think
why
it's also
your fantasy is killing people.
It's table compatibility.
So,
it's table compatibility because I'm sure those people will find tables of other murder hobos and they just get to go rampage and love that.
And that's that can be a stylistic too.
But it's also like you gotta understand like the keywords are collaborative storytelling, and if your actions are actively impeding on the fun of other people at that table. Then maybe that's not the game for you, my guy. I'm so sorry.
No, I love that. Like,
I thought that was such an interesting thing. And we also kind of mentioned, you know, things like shared initiative. Like instead of whenever someone rolls the same initiative as the other people, they can have a shared initiative where they can team up to, you know, maybe do a more powerful attack or do like a wombo combo.
Like it's like casting a support spell and then like melee people flanking or like, you know, working together so you're not as tightly bound by the initiative order or like someone having to delay a turn or something. But
we also have things in that Sunday campaign where Teddy has a lot of unique rules that I really enjoy. One of them is like instead of how advantage can't be stacked, if you are choosing to use your action to help somebody, you know, they can get advantage if somebody else chooses to help them as well. Because you know how sometimes you're like, I have this big spell, but I really need this shit to hit or else it's gonna suck wasting it. So it's like, okay, one person has used their turn to give you advantage. The other person has now used their turn to also help. But since you already have advantage, you get a +2 to your roll on top of advantage.
Or it's like if you've had advantage on a check or whatever from like an ability or a feat or whatever, you can get a bonus to that. Because I think just to encourage like collaboration and us working together. Because he wants us to be aware that like the stakes be staking.
Yeah. And if somebody's got a big beefy spell or big beefy attack that you're like, I really need the best odds for this to hit or else it's going to suck for everyone in this room.
Yeah.
kind of thing. And that way we can all communicate as a team and be like, no, I'm going to use my turn to help this person. Or I think also, we have a thing where, you know, if you're out of spell slots or you have like feat abilities that you can only use once a day, and say, you know, it's down to the wire, it's tense, and you're like, we've got no hope left and it's really bad, you can kind of dig deep and you can either expend some health to make sure this happens, or you can get a point of exhaustion in order to make that shit pop off.
So it's a very like,
Oh,
you have to be
interesting.
judicious with when you use it.
Yeah.
But if you're
Yes.
like down to the wire, if you
And like, I need a Hail
something you
Mary
can do.
situation,
Sure.
then it's like, yeah, you'll do that, and you'll either get a chance to achieve it, or like it'll just happen.
I love that. And there's so many ways that you could break that down too. Like a lot of times you're like, oh, I'm out of spell slots. Like there's nothing left, like you had mentioned, but like that's so cool. Like you could take a point of exhaustion, you could take up some health. I mean, like other ways to explore that too are like you could sacrifice an item. You like, let's say you have a magic item or something, you know, that you could pull energy from. Just like a call, like calling out to a divine source, you know,
Yeah.
like if you have a patron, you know, or if you worship a god, like something like that,
Yeah.
you know,
And
Like a
roll to
cool.
see if they answer.
Or like a caster, like
Yeah,
burning through
Sure.
their arcane focus or something
Yeah.
to do
Right.
like a Hail Mary, and then like you're gonna have to replace that focus, and
Yeah.
that might be difficult to do.
Totally. Well, and that's kind of cool too. Like if you need to use a spell, you know, or dig deep like that, like you could even take like an effect, you know, like you do that, or there's a scorpion nearby, and after you do that you get poisoned because of this, you know, there's so many ways that you could explore that. I love that a lot. So
Yeah.
I mean, that's understated in the community. Like there are so many ways to approach it, and so many people get caught up in just following the rule book, but that's what you're there for, is like interpretive collaborative storytelling. Like everything's on the table. Like
Yeah. And
don't
just to not be afraid
underestimate
to
that.
like implement your own rules. That like home rules
100%.
are such a great way to make that table and that game unique.
Yeah.
And you know, we've had discussions sometimes where I'm like, we've played at one table and then gone to somebody else's table, and you're like, I forgot that I was spoiled over there.
Yeah.
And now I have to like adhere to different rules. But it adds that element of like customization to your style, your games, and what makes people want to play at your table.
And that's so cool because you're creating a new system for yourself where you suddenly have expectations for how a good game should be, you know, and suddenly you're like, okay, I know now that I can't really play with this group, not because they did anything bad, but because like I've found this new way where I can explore this experience for myself, and it's just improved. It's way better. So that's a really important element as well. I love that.
Is there anything in your past experiences at other tables that you're like, this is so unique to this table or this game that either you've run or like you've experienced, that you're like, oh, this is just a good time or good memory or something you just really enjoy?
Sure, that's a great question. I'm gonna think on that while I tell one thing that I've enjoyed from TTRPGs, which I have been so honored to explore in RD5 with Erica and their team. And that is, you get experience from failing. So often in D&D, there are harsh consequences for failing, taking damage, you know, not being able to achieve your goal. Whereas in a lot of other TTRPGs, you failing results in a positive outcome later. You get an ability score, or you level up, you know, and that's so important to real life too, because like it helps you keep a positive perspective when you make mistakes. You know, you're like, wow, I'm learning from that. I don't have to feel shame about that. I don't have to, you know, absorb all of these opinions and negative consequences and guilt and everything like that. You're like, this is for the better. This is making me better. And I think that's one thing that really should be implemented in D&D as well. You know, like, okay, you failed, you're going to level up. You know, like, don't be afraid to fail. That's what we're here for, you know? So I love that a lot. But, so that's one of my main, unique experiences at a table. However, it's not unique, in the way that other systems have recognized it. I think in D&D, like, one of my most positive experiences has just been like the immersiveness. The first serious game I ever played in, the DM had this storytelling ability where it was so immersive that when the game ended, you were like, I really don't know what's real life and what's not.
Yeah.
And I have yet to experience that in any other game. It's been almost 10 years.
Wow.
And so that's something that I look forward to experiencing again, you know, like with other talented DMs, or even something I'd be able to develop myself for
and give
other
to other
players,
people.
you know.
Yeah.
100%. I want that for everyone because it's surreal at that point. Like it does change your perspective and your expectations for the games that you join. So that's been really special for me.
What do you feel like it was that created that degree
Mhm.
of immersion? Like, is it some kind of intangible thing, or are there things you
I
can point
wonder.
to?
You know, like there are some things I can point to, but like I feel like me even calling out some of these things would be overshadowing more of it. And so I'll do my best to try to recall, you know, what made it so special. I think one thing was that he made every NPC so unique, not just in the way where it's like, this is Deborah. She has a household and a son. She's pretty poor, kind of a thing. But he would outline, okay, there's this character that has this backstory and I know how to play him uniquely. But then again, there's this creature and I've observed his abilities, you know, and maybe even he's really into singing or he's really into his own improv and he would act that out with such depth. And I think that's what made it
There was like a
really
believability
immersive too.
Yeah,
to
like,
every character that he
all the
would
characters
enact.
were round characters. Like
Yeah.
they weren't flat or super two-dimensional.
Exactly. And that's funny because I was just going to use that word, like, and the way I'm explaining it makes it almost seem flat. Like, I wish that there was a better way. Like, I am not explaining it well enough. You
No,
know,
I
to,
get what
like,
you mean.
really
You
encapture. Yeah.
It's hard to explain that, but
Okay.
like, it comes from like
It is.
also just writer brain of like how you make people and how you make them real. And like adding things like, yeah, hobbies or talents or tics or little speech patterns or even things that like, because we fall into, you know, voices or accents a lot. And that's a point of stress
Sure.
for a lot of people running games because they're like, I am not human sound machine. Like,
Yeah.
can't. But
Right.
there's so many other ways, like, especially when you're in person or you're playing and you're on video, we can see you, that you can, like, we do a lot of physical acting and you can change your posture.
Yeah.
And how your gestures and your facial expression or your cadence with how you speak. And that's enough. And there's so many like little things that you can add in to
100%.
make people more real and make them more distinctive.
I'm such a maladaptive daydreamer that I fall into that space real easy with almost all of my games, at least the in-person ones. Like online, I feel like I have trouble getting into that headspace with. But when it's a physical game, there's something about like sitting at that table, especially with a good group that like gets into it.
Yeah.
That I'm like, I will come out of that session feeling like I was just experiencing it all as like a movie in my head.
Yep.
And I'm like, and then I tune back and I'm like, oh, this is just a little table with little toys on it.
Yeah.
And I just had a whole scene in my head. But
Dang,
like
I
I fall into that so easy. But it's also as a DM, like it's really rewarding. At least for me, and like I'm privileged to say that I have a group of like very, very talented role players and they really like get into it. And watching them find their joy, find their fun, and like get to experience real emotions at that table behind these characters is like one of the most deeply like honoring and satisfying things I've ever had.
For sure. And I think that's a huge element too that I didn't call out was it was an in-person game. And I think that played a huge element, being able to see his facial expressions, you know, and see how he would act it out. But I feel like I've been thinking about it, and I don't mean to sound cliche, but a good real life example of that is like Brennan Lee Mulligan. The way he DMs, he is able to step into the shoes of his NPCs and even his characters in ways that I haven't been able to see in any other DM. Matt from Critical Role does a good job. I feel like Brennan does it even better, especially in the game where they were exploring, and I can't recall the name of it, but they were exploring Aor and the different floating cities. Gosh, I wish I could recall the name of that.
Exandria Unlimited, the Calamity.
Oh,
yes, Calamity.
I still haven't watched the last episode of that because I know it's gonna hurt me emotionally.
I have not emotionally recovered from that.
Oh,
like even I know
there are quotes
that
I still think about.
Yeah,
to this day.
His monologues are incredible.
It's crazy. It's crazy. He is such a genius, and I love that he has that philosophical background. But really quick, a really quick plug that I just want to get. I was listening to the last bit of it, like the last 15 minutes at 3 a.m. I was coming back from the gym. I was in my car, and this was insane because it was such an emotional and engaging moment where he's kind of closing up the campaign, and there's separate stories. And this huge meteor that was like white and green and purple, I will always remember this, flew past my car, and I just started crying. I was like, what is happening? This is insane. This is existential in all dimensions, like it was such a powerful moment for me to kind of see that and see such greatness as I'm listening to this. That's such
what's wild? I had a similar experience.
No, you did not.
Not necessarily with that. Not necessarily with that, but it is something of like I came out of a session where it was our Ravenloft session, and I was playing this like robot Warforged, and like it was like a kink centered Ravenloft session. And I came into it before it became a kink campaign with this like a little Warforged concept in mind. And like I was already so invested in her story and how I'd woven her in that I was like, I'm not gonna change it. Ran into issues with the DM about like whether robots could like get sexy or whatever, and I was like, bro, if you need me to send you source material, I got that aplenty.
Yes.
But we were just coming to heads with like he couldn't conceptualize it for himself. I was having an awkward time like with that character, and then I was enjoying watching other people get like their moments in the sun, but I was like, I'm not feeling comfortable enough in this character as she's like developed as like pretty much like an asexual Warforged is what ultimately happened. But I'm like I'm having fun watching other people, but I wanna enjoy like what this game was supposed to be about too.
Yeah.
So we talked it over.
The horny shenanigans element you just weren't able to access
through that character.
Because it's like we can make you the Forbidden Toys R Us.
Yeah, I was like, does she need to have attachments? Like, what do you need to make this happen? It wasn't clicking for him. And so I was like, I discussed like basically arranging like her in-character death so that I could bring in another character that was going to have like that time. And ironically enough, after I made that decision, I was like having just a fine time playing her. But eventually like we got to the scene and we had been building up to it where I knew we were in Waterdeep, which is like a pirate land and stuff. And so he was like, it's going to happen in this world. So just be ready for that. And it's going to be like a storm while we're out at sea. And so she has like the spirit of a water genasi in her that's like kind of lying dormant. And we had a whole canon around like genasi being formed when these storms happen. And they're like elemental storms called Ronin Fawns. Think of like a Northern Lights meets a thunder, like lightning storm. So we did that, and he was like describing it, and he had like the music going, and he described it in such a way that it was like we're out in this rain, and then like the sky splitting open, and it's like all pinks and blues and purples and yellows and things like that, and just the visuals of how he explained it, and like the whole scene was so dramatic. And we had like a betrayal within the party, which is how I ended up dying, which like brought a shock to me. Like I didn't see it coming, and it was so good.
Oh my gosh.
And then like after that scene, like I cried. It was a whole thing. It was like everybody was like, this is amazing. And when I drove home, I was driving home from like he lived like 45 minutes away from where I live, so I was driving down the highway out here in Texas and stuff, and I drove through a storm that was no rain, just crazy ass lightning. and the full sky was of like all these storm clouds, and it was sunset. So it was like the whole cloudscape was just oranges and purples and blues and just lightning. No thunder, no rain, just lightning. And all of these like beautiful colors in the sky.
Colors from the sunset.
And I was like playing the song the whole drive home that he played during that scene. And I was literally sitting there in my car. I was like, this is like, I'm having an existential moment. And I was like,
my immersion is too deep.
My immersion is too deep. I'm in the game. I was like, texting everyone in the group chat while that was happening. Because I was like, everyone went a different direction than me to go home. And so I was like the only one experiencing it. And I was like, this is wild.
You know, like that's crazy. You will remember that the rest of your life.
Oh, yeah.
Like that is such like a like your own character development backstory. Like that's a huge element of that. Like that's insane. I think it would be so cool. Like I wonder how many other people like have experiences like ours, you know, that change the narrative of our lives and make such a huge impression on that, like from tabletop experiences.
Yeah, like that character will forever have such a place in my heart because of that. And it felt
100%.
Yeah, it felt like serendipitous.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That might be my new purpose. Like I'm in the middle of so many projects right now, but that sounds like such a cool idea to like document these stories and make it into a book. Like,
right. That would be cool.
Gosh. Yeah. Like a D&D documentary of like
yeah, that's
in
just
body,
like
out of body.
In character, out of character.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's crazy. Oh, so cool. I love that so much. Thank you for sharing that too.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's amazing.
Well, we're definitely like a little bit over on time, but this has been such a great conversation, and we're so happy that you came on.
Thank you so much for having me too.
Yeah.
I'm so flattered.
Absolutely. Give us all of your shameless plugs. Give us all your ats so that people can know where to follow you and follow all these cool projects that you got going on.
Oh, thank you. Yes. Again, I'm Natalie New. Thank you for joining us tonight or whenever you happen to be listening to this. You can find me at New to You with 3 U's. It sounds just like how it's spelled. It's like brand new to you. Yeah. On Instagram and on TikTok. I'm mostly active on TikTok, but you can find me both places. Keep an eye out and follow along with my journey too, as I kind of explore these different platforms as well. And never stop listening to Table Talk. You know, this has been such a great experience. Keep up with this podcast. Keep up with your favorite creators. And thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Sounds great. Bye, everyone.
Table Talk is a podcast brought to you by Mythos Media Productions, bringing you a new episode every Wednesday, wherever you get your podcast. Find us on Instagram and TikTok at Table Talk RPG, or check us out at our website, mythosmediaproductions.godaddyscites.com. All business inquiries can reach out to us via email at info@mythosmediaproductions.com.